What is something weird your parents did that you used to think was completely normal? Story 1. Whenever my mother would open a new jar of peanut butter, she would always call for my brother and me to have a dip before she made our sandwiches or whatever it was that she was preparing. A dip, in this case, referred to our family practice of sticking our pinky fingers, after we'd washed our hands, into the fresh, smooth surface of the peanut butter. There was something very satisfying about it, in a way that made it seem like licking our fingers clean was almost entirely an afterthought rather than being the actual purpose of the practice. Truth be told, my brother and I were a little bit too fanatical about the routine, to the point where we'd actually discuss it sometimes at great length whenever we became aware that our current jar of peanut butter was running low. Now, I mistakenly thought that everyone dipped into their sandwich spread when presented with the opportunity. But of course, that wasn't the case. This realization wound up causing me a rather profound sense of shock when my friend Alex's mother took it upon herself to make lunch for her son and me one afternoon. I watched with rapt anticipation as she opened the jar of peanut butter, removed the freshness seal, and then completely skipped asking for the assembled children to dip into it. "What are you doing?" I shrieked, seeing the woman's knife pierce the peanut butter's surface. She turned to look at me, obviously concerned. "What's wrong, Max? Is everything okay?" I stammered, unable to get the words out. "We didn't dip." The woman's worry quickly gave way to confusion. "Dip," she repeated. "What do you mean?" I did my best to describe the concept, but my 5-year-old brain was already preoccupied with a sense of mild panic. I was eventually invited to demonstrate, but I steadfastly refused. After all, the peanut butter had already been violated by the butter knife, thus rendering the entire exercise pointless. While I did manage to explain several minutes later what the dipping routine was supposed to involve, the situation was almost too much for my tiny brain to comprehend. Some people, it seemed, simply did not dip. Were they barbarians? Didn't they understand that dipping was absolutely essential? Or was it, the next time that my mother opened a jar of peanut butter, I responded to her summons like I always did upon arriving though. I held my hand back and looked her in the eye. "You know, Mom," I said, "some people don't dip their peanut butter." She was less shocked than I had been. TLDR, my friend's mother violated a jar of peanut butter before I could finger it. Story 2. My friends and I used to play the toaster game. You know, those iron bridges that resemble old-style toasters. When early 20s me and my pals mid-1970s would approach one, would announce what kind of bread we were, im whole wheat, im a bagel, im cinnamon bread, etc. Then we'd go over the bridge pretending that we were pieces of bread being toasted. The fun part was screaming HHHH the whole way over through the bridge and exclaiming, after we'd crossed, how crispy we felt. I continued this tradition when I met my wife, and we really enjoyed it. It became ritual. Flash forward to the day our 10-year-old daughter marched into the house after being dropped off at home by her friend and her friend's parents after an outing. "Not everyone plays the toaster game, do they?" she demanded. Apparently her little friend's dad freaked out when she screamed HHHH from the back seat when they went over a bridge. It was the first time she challenged our parenting skills and she was not amused at first, but upon reflection she thought it was pretty cool. Edit, thanks for the gold. Hey, race the kind of bridge we play with. Story 3. I used to think most kids had gone through the experience of having to get all new dishware because their father smashed it all in a blind rage, and that the corresponding markings from the smashed ceramic were commonplace in most kitchens. Dad hitting mom wasn't weird. It was a natural consequence of a fight getting out of hand. I didn't know it was frowned upon to go through an entire 12-pack in one night, although the aftereffects of it occasionally frightened me. The screaming bouts that permeated the house at midnight could be easily drowned out by cranking up the volume on my Ninja Turtles VHS. My dad was and is unemployed as much as he was employed, and it was not uncommon for the only interaction I had with him to be him yelling at me about losing the remote before he retreated back into his bedroom, the door of which he had broken. Of course, I know now that the things he did were extreme and, in most cases, abusive, and I hope to grow up to be better than him. TLDR, my dad had weird ideas about home decorating. Story 4. It isn't my parents but what me and my missus used to do to our son. He was so attached to my wife that it is near impossible to find time for sexy time. The only way we could get 20 minutes alone without him in the room was to lie and say we had to call Santa Claus and give him a naughty or nice report. He would sit quietly watching TV as we called Santa Claus. One day when he gets older he is going to realize what mom and dad were doing each time we were calling Santa, and I am sure it will be a traumatic realization. Story 5. Slept in separate beds. My dad slept in the king-size master bed, while my mom slept in a dinky twin bed next to it. I mean, now I know that kind of thing happens for one reason or another, such as insomnia, bad gas, whatever. In this case, it was because my dad was an extremely restless sleeper. But I didn't find out it wasn't the norm until we were watching TV when I was about 10 and there was a couple on the TV sleeping in the same bed. And I went, what the heck? Why are they both in his bed? Where is her bed? Story 6. My dad would beat the out of me if I showed any type of emotion, then do some drill sergeant and make me do push-ups and stuff to man up. I was like 3 when that started, so I legit thought that was just what fathers did to make sure their sons grew up to be men. TLDR, I don't talk to my father anymore. Story 7. Had me and my brothers drinking with them. My family is Italian, and we used to drink Pepsi mixed with wine all the time when we ate pasta. I was 8 when this started. Story 8. Well, my father loved hanging things on the walls. Paintings were nice, we had plenty, but most of what we had, particularly in the front hall, were masks. Yes, masks, all sorts, African, Asian, stuff I couldn't identify. If you ever watched Home Improvement, there were some episodes where you saw the inside of Wilson's house. It was a bit like that. I came to see them as guardians for the house, scare away bad spirits, luck, juju, that sort of thing. After my father passed, we split the masks, totems and three-ways mom, bro me, tradition will continue. Story 9. When it's time to dust, my dad would open up all the doors and windows and use a leaf blower. Didn't know there was a different way for a while, and that the peanut butter went in the fridge. Found out like 3 years ago that was weird. Story 10. My dad has always had bad OCD, the kind that you see on TV of people doing weird rituals all day. Well, one of these things would be right when he walked through the front door from work. He'd walk a few steps, whisper something to himself, stop, walk a few more steps, whisper more things to himself, and repeat this process for about an hour all around the house. If a person or animal simply walked in his way, or somehow disturbed this ritual, he would have to do it all over again. Never thought much of it at all until I moved back in with my parents as an adult for about a year. Story 11. Told each other and my brother and I that they loved us every day. They provided food, clothing, shelter, and so much more. It wasn't until I was nearly 30 that I realized how amazingly well-adjusted my family was. We did, and actually still do, love each other like family. My mother and father have been married for nearly 50 years. I thought everyone had a family like this. I heard about child abuse. I thought that those kids would go home, get abused, then life would return to normal and dinner would be had, etc. The values my parents instilled in me have lasted my whole life. My world contains compassion and kindness that I rarely see in others anymore. Be a good person. Treat others like you want to be treated. Live your life to be happy, not for physical things. Story 12. Jarping eggs. I recently uncovered how weird they are when I visited my in-laws at Easter, and they had never heard of it. I then asked around a large sample of people, and none of them had heard of it either. Basically, you get a bunch of eggs and hard-boil them with red onion skins in the water. This turns them a pleasing autumnal brown color. You then all take an egg and bang them against the ends of each other's eggs until only one person has at least one unsmashed egg end. That person is crowned victorious and presumably wins at Easter. Story 13. Checked to see if the oven was off and the toaster unplugged, and the door was locked several times before we left the house. My mother made us lock the door, pull it hard, jiggle the handle back and forth like we were trying to get in. And we always had to make sure the stove and oven were off even if they hadn't been used that day. Story 14. Drinking. I had no idea how much more my parents drank than your normal American. My dad has drank at least 2 glasses of whiskey every day for my entire life that I can recall. It wasn't until I moved out and met more people that I realized that most people don't get at least a little drunk every night for decades. Story 15. Raised by grandparents. My grandmother was always sick. She would find things on newspaper her friends had and suddenly would develop them. She eventually died after faking a back injury and somehow talked a doctor to operating on her. She never walked again, and 3 years later of actually suffering she died of congestive heart failure. Though everyone's grandmother got mysterious illnesses. That is until my mother got out of prison and developed the same condition. Story 16. My mom had a really weird remedy for removing a finger sliver. If my sister or I got a sliver in our finger, she would soak a piece of bread in milk and wrap it around our finger with a bandage. We'd sleep with it like that, and she would remove the sliver the next morning with tweezers. All her other first aid techniques were much more conventional, but looking back, that sliver thing was just weird. Story 17. My mom was obsessively clean. Everything, everyone in the home at all times had to be perfect. It wasn't until middle school that I realized her standards were unrealistic to most. Story 18. My dad always lined up his French fries in a row when he would have them dumped out on a plate, and eventually I started to do this too. People continue to look at me weird when I have French fries in a nice orderly row on my plate napkin. Story 19. My parents would never let me go downstairs after everyone had gone to bed. It was almost like going downstairs was like blaspheming on the Bible. They would flip there if I went downstairs after bedtime. One day, aged 15, I snuck downstairs because I had a migraine, and upstairs was too hot and stuffy, making it worse. In no less than 10 minuets, Dad comes bellowing down the stairs, threatening to throw me out of the house. WTF. Story 20. My parents would go to the bathroom past midnight, and I always thought that was normal until I found out they were doing it and just needed to pee to clean their reproductive system. Story 21. I lived with my gay dad growing up. He gave me baths until I was 10 years old, no weird stuff, but he washed my hair for me and I washed my body. Way too embarrassed to tell anyone that now. Story 22. My mum would make us pour out our cereal into the toilet if we didn't finish it. The sound it made used to make me gag, and I never eat cereal with milk now. I don't know why it made me feel so sick or why we couldn't just put it in the bin. Story 23. My parents didn't allow shoes to be worn inside. I know this is common in Asian cultures, but my family isn't Asian, and nobody else I knew did this, so they didn't pick it up from anybody. Anytime my sisters or I had friends over, they would get annoyed at my parents for being nagged about their shoes. Story 24. Both my grandparents and parents keep their unopened tinned goods, baked beans, tinned vegetables, soup etc. in the fridge. We had plenty of space on the cupboards, so I grew up thinking that this was perfectly normal. When I moved into university accommodation at 18, I soon learned that it was perfectly okay and normal for tins to go in a cupboard. Edit, missed a word. Story 25. We would break into houses that were being developed, vacant houses that weren't finished yet. We would drive around neighborhoods until we saw a house we wanted to look into, And then the fun began. I can remember reaching through the hole where door handle should have been and unlocking the deadbolt from the inside. We'd try all of the doors, and if that failed, we would boost my dad through a window. There was nary a house we couldn't gain access to. Once inside, my parents would walk around and check out the floor plan while my sister and I went off and played with nails and electrical wiring or whatever else. We did this for about 3 years, and then my dad became a general contractor until the 2008 crash. It was all good fun. The whole family participated, we never got caught, and we did it at least twice a month. I had no idea that was weird until my sister and I talked about it years later, and I realized we were committing several minor crimes. Story 26. Not weird per se, but I didn't know some people were stay-at-home parents outside of TV. Both of my parents always worked. It's weird because to this day at the age of 25, I now judge former classmates of mine who have kids and are stay-at-home parents. I know I shouldn't, but it's ingrained in my head to think that way. Story 27. My mother put our toothbrushes in the dishwasher to sanitize them. I only realized this was abnormal when my boyfriend wondered why we had so many toothbrushes. Story 28. My parents weren't crazy, but my dad has stories that he's mentioned a few times. Highlights: 1. His mother would see an empty parking spot, make him get out of the car and stand in said spot for her to loop around. He reserved it. 2. His mother would pull into the gas station every day and buy one of gas. Wouldn't fill up. 3. The kids left beer and cookies for Santa. Story 29. My parents never ever let people anywhere in the house. Ever. They were extremely unwelcoming. Also, they hated me owning fish. My dad had a complete tantrum because I bought a betta and had him in a 2-gallon tank in my bathroom. Story 30. I thought every family hid birthday presents and made the birthday boy girl search the house for them. Nope, just my family and my extended family, because my grandmother apparently started this. Story 31. We had a female cat that fell pregnant by a neighborhood stray and my parents were too careless to keep her inside or get her fixed. It was awesome for a while, playing with the kittens, seeing them go through the stages from where they were crawling flat on the floor with their eyes closed to climbing the curtains and sprinting around the house. They bothered my mother's allergies a lot though, so as soon as they were old enough, we gave them to a pet store to sell. The weird part was what my parents did next, which I was too young, too ambivalent to question. We used to go on long car rides to see relatives several hours south of us. On one trip, we took the female cat, doped up on gravel and put her in a cardboard box folded closed, not taped. And my parents took her out of the box and left her at the side of the road, in the middle of nowhere. A couple hours into the drive, they abandoned her. As a kid I always hoped that she would somehow find her way home to us. But that never happened. Instead she probably died out there, or more hopefully, became someone's barn cat. She was a sweetheart and we really missed her. The only thing she ever did wrong was get pregnant and have kittens. Not sure it's worth mentioning, but in addition to her we had 2 fixed male cats at home that we kept until they grew old and got so sick they had to be put to sleep at the vet. I would argue they were neglected because of why each died, but I was yelled at or ignored for my concern. Only the one cat was ever abandoned. Story 32. Up until the age of around 15, I thought that omelets were pancakes. Turns out my mom didn't know how to make pancakes one day, so she just made me an omelet and told me it was a pancake. After that happened it seemed easier just to keep it going rather than come clean. I only found out at about 15 when someone made me an actual pancake. Story 33. My mom used to stand up at church with her hands in the air and close her eyes while swaying back and forth. I thought that was stereotypical mother behavior. Story 34. Using toilet paper rolls around the house instead of tissue boxes. I recall offering half a toilet roll to a friend to blow their nose in school and the look of horror that came with it. God forbid it touched their nose and not their butt. Story 35. My mom and dad smoked a lot of weed. Wherever we went my mom would roll while my dad drove. They smoked wherever we went. This was in Maine back in the 70s. So we moved to NC in 1977 and I found out this stuff was illegal and no one around here did it, ever, the Bible Belt and all. I loved the smell of that stuff when they lit it up. Smelled sweeter than cigarettes to me. Story 36. We were farmer brats and lived in places with a lot of transplants, so for the longest time I didn't realize that other people didn't move every few years. It still shocks me that some of my friends have lived in the same house, or at least the same town until they left for college. Story 37. My grandmother used to make my dad eat his vegetables over cold milk for breakfast the next morning if he didn't finish them. He turned out okay though. We just have to make sure we eat breakfast before he wakes up or his PTSD starts acting up. Story 38. Stuff used Kleenex under the couch. My dad would blow his nose, ball up the Kleenex, and shove it under the couch. There would be hundreds of used Kleenexes under there until it got too full. Only when there were so many would they be gathered and thrown away. I had odd parents. Story 39. My grandmother also cuts up all of our old clothes and re-knits them into rugs. It's amazing, and if your grandmothers do not do this, you should be jealous. Story 40. My mother casts runes whenever she has problems. She also used to dance naked under the moonlight when I was little, but to this day still denies it. Slavic pagan people problems. Story 41. Cutting sandwiches with scissors. Grew up with 2 pairs in our kitchen for whatever food-related use we could find. Thought it was normal until college, when I got laughed out of my apartment. For the record, I still do it and think it's normal. Story 42. When I was little, my mum used to take out splinters by stretching my skin away from them with a safety pin sewing needle and pulling them out with her fingers. It was incredibly painful, so my dad would sit me on his knee and wrap his arms around me so I couldn't get away. Apparently it was better than tweezers. We used to have green smoothies every day with breakfast, and when I went to my first sleepover and only got cereal in the morning, I thought I would actually die from not having one. I thought all kids learned the proper anatomical names for body parts, so I'd say things like I'm gonna hit you in the vulva if you don't stop being a meanie, at preschool. Story 43. My MIL calls green peppers mangoes. When I first started dating her son, he was telling me how he doesn't like mangoes in his chili. It took a full day to convince him that green peppers and mangoes are two different things. Story 44. Perhaps not that strange, but for as long as I can remember, my parents were crazy sticklers about table manners. I knew which side my bread plate and water glass were supposed to go by like, age 7. I realized it wasn't normal to be crazy about that stuff because most of my friends in high school and college seemed to be oblivious to that stuff. My parents are responsible for my weird dinner table elitisms. Story 45. This one is going to be sad. I thought that every child got beaten when they were naughty because that's what my father taught me. I thought that screaming at your boyfriend and hitting them because you thought it was funny was normal because my mother did it to everyone she dated. I thought hitting, kicking, throwing, and screaming at animals was normal because both my parents did it to every pet we had. I thought being called a waste of space, useless, and pathetic was normal. I thought your parents making fun of your weight and putting you on a diet was normal. It wasn't until I was around 10 to 12 and started hanging out with other kids that I realized there was something really wrong with my life. Story 46. I was loved and cared about, and we had family discussions and had everyone's opinion asked whenever we had an issue, and even brought in third-party nonpartisan opinions on issues that affected us. Weird, right? Story 47. My dad cuts up his spaghetti noodles, like he slices them with a butter knife. I always thought you either eat them normally, twirl them, or cut them. Never seen anyone do that but my dad to this day. Story 48. Let my siblings and I watch movies that were probably not appropriate for children. Horror and action movies. My dad even took my sister and me to watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre when I was 11 and she was 10. Story 49. Rarely drink and never curse. Most of our relatives as well as my sisters drink, and with family at big gatherings my parents will maybe drink a bottle of beer or a little wine, but only after a lot of encouragement. Not supposed to curse until I'm 25, but that ship sailed many times already. My friends' parents curse fairly often around me and my friends. Story 50. This is more my mother and my grandmother. The latter speaks as you may expect an 85-year-old to speak. It is quite old-fashioned with some of her words. In particular, she still uses the term gay to mean happy. In her company, my mother switches into nan mode and speaks as she does, I think just to be polite. When I was little, I only picked up the happy definition of gay, and used the word a lot at school, oblivious of homosexuality. I'd totally forgotten about this. I was only 6 or 7 at the time until told this Christmas, as I found out that virtually everyone in my older close family had recollection of me doing that. And one aunt was doing an impression of cute little 6-year-old Nick. Everyone had that silly memory of me for almost 20 years, and no one had ever mentioned it to me. I did that, really. I know it's nothing especially noteworthy in itself. I was just blown away that I was oblivious to it this whole time. Story 51. Calling a laundry basket a flasket. Turns out it's a really uncommon colloquial term. Not even most of my local friends had a clue of its existence, let alone my university friends who already think I talk like a farmer. Story 52. I used to think all kids had cape houses and boats. Parents would always take me and my sis to our cape house to go jet skiing or tubing or to get lobster traps. I just assumed everyone did the same. Story 53. I would like to specify that my parents love each other very much, but their relationship has sitcom levels of dysfunctionality to it. My dad's cutesy nickname for my mom is Woman, and he has no qualms about using that in public. In public, he will walk 20 feet in front of my mom and when she gets too far behind, will yell "Come on woman." I'm not getting any younger, over his shoulder. My parents are also the least affectionate couple on the face of the planet. I have never seen them kiss or hold hands in public or private. Story 54. My dad used to tell us all of his financial problems and that we might lose the house or that the power might get cut off constantly from at least age 8 or 9. As I got older I knew how up this was, but it wasn't until I was out on my own and really meeting people that I truly understood how up and psychologically traumatic this was. Parents should protect kids from this stuff. We constantly felt like the sky was falling and there was no stability. Story 55. My parents are just weird in general. I reached about age 14 and realized that my parents weren't like my friends' parents. My friends' parents would occasionally socialize with other couples or work colleagues. My parents didn't at all. I'm very sociable, and that's the one thing about getting older that scares me. Story 56. My parents had the same birthday, and I just assumed this was normal. Couldn't figure out how that lined up or why other people's parents didn't have it though. Story 57. Until very recently my mum would refuse all forms of physical intimacy, hugs, kisses, etc., and if forced to cuddle me would look like she was in physical pain. She cares for me very much, but has always expressed her love through material goods or real-world action, skipping dinners to make sure we ate well, fighting for our rights when we were unable to, etc. She's a high-functioning autistic, and although she is capable of some physical touch I was born, so something must have happened. She hates it. Not great when you're the complete opposite, but I always assumed growing up that parents didn't do that to their kids. It was only with romantic partners. Story 58. For holiday meals, My family eats mashed potatoes with these dumpling-like noodles on top. Because starch, I thought everyone served their mashed potatoes like that until I ate my first holiday meal away from home and someone handed me gravy for my potatoes. Story 59. We weren't allowed to have toys out of our rooms. If we wanted to play with toys or an activity, it was always in our room, arts and crafts at our desk in our room. If we took toys out and played in the living room, they were taken away and put in a box until we had done a chore and got them back. We weren't even allowed to play make-believe in house, only our bedrooms. I thought this was normal, until I started going to friends' houses and noticed they had toy bins in the living room, or a playroom, and we were allowed to play around the entire house. When I asked why we couldn't play with our toys in the rest of the house, I was told the house isn't yours. Having a bedroom is a privilege we offer you, just as letting you keep your belongings in that room is a privilege. Children should be seen and not heard, and sometimes there are circumstances where children shouldn't be seen either. This came from my stepfather. Then later my mom tried to downplay it and say he just meant the house should always look tidy. Nope, he was just in when I was growing up. Story 60. Sitting down at the dinner table to eat as a family. At least judging by my own observations and by the reactions of the vast majority of my friend sexes when they hear this, my parents' marriage was nowhere near perfect, and it was truly for the best that they divorced after 22 years after I graduated high school. But I will say this, even as a teenager with a car, I was always home by the time told to me for dinner at the table. For all our flaws and dysfunction, we always put away when it came time to sit down and eat dinner, no cell phones or TVs playing either, and I truly believe that it's the main reason my parents were able to keep it together until I was done with high school. For all the craziness and questionable examples they set for me and my sister in terms of relationships, my hat is firmly and permanently doffed to them for providing us with a stable home and consistent routine. Cook some dinner for your kids, people. Story 61. Get me exemptions from vaccinations and stuff. The first shot I remember getting was a tetanus shot after I got stabbed in the hand during middle school. Besides that, I'm currently unvaccinated, seeing to fixing that now that I'm in college. Story 62. My parents don't drink, so I find the idea of keeping alcohol in the house very strange. When I was a kid, I thought drinking was just something people in movies do. I also think anything alcoholic tastes and smells absolutely vile. Story 63. When I was young, my grandma would take me on trips to fast food restaurants because my parents typically forbid them, and she was cool like that. And when we ordered fries in the drive-thru, she would tuck them in between the vent flaps with the AC on to cool them down a bit before eating. Story 64. My parents never, ever played music. Would drive for hours for family vacations with the radio off. Unless we were talking, it was silent. It didn't seem weird to me until I married a musical genius. Our life is filled with music now, and I love it. Story 65. When my sister and I were little, our parents would say kachunta when we sneezed as a way of saying bless you. I thought it was something normal people said to someone who sneezed, so for a long time I would say kachunta. I finally stopped when I kept getting weird looks from people. Story 66. My whole family makes arepas, assume they're pancakes all the time. And when the last bit of dough wasn't enough to make a full-sized one, we always made a tiny one, and the youngest member of the family who was in the house at the time ate that tiny arepa. People still laugh at me when I cook and make that one tiny pancake or arepa. It's called Cuba. Story 67. Professional bodybuilding in the 1980s. There are a lot of weird things that come along with that, but I didn't think anything of it at the time. My earliest memories are of spending 8-hour days at Gold's Gym, sitting on the mats while my mom and dad worked out. Sometimes other bodybuilders would read to me. Some of our family friends were pro wrestlers. I got plain, steamed broccoli instead of popcorn on movie nights, loved it. My parents would get roid rages, and I thought that's just how adults dealt with pre-competition stress and dieting. It all seemed really normal to me until a friend pointed out that most moms don't have to cut the neckline out of their t-shirts, or have giant bulging veins everywhere. Story 68. Change house rules depending on their mood. I thought no one really knew if it was okay to eat a sandwich in the living room, and that they didn't really know when they wanted their kids back home, and stuff. Story 69. Some people don't use coasters and allow you to put your feet on the coffee table. We go shoeless in my house, and if you put your feet on the coffee table, you absolutely would hear from my mom about how you're going to take the finish off. Story 70. My parents would put bread in the fridge, causing it to go stale overnight. I didn't taste non-stale bread until college. Good God, I could actually hear angels sing when I took my first bite. Story 71. My family has a few slang words, situation, scenario, because my grandfather likes to say it, a brother's name for putting a shirt on backwards, double brother's name for backwards and inside out, etc. Story 72. My parents didn't sleep in the same bed for as long as I remember. When I found out that other married couples do, I was very surprised and thought it strange. Story 73. Nothing they really did. It's just, my mom is the middle child in her family and has a younger brother and an older brother, and my dad is also the middle child in his family and has an older sister and a punger sister. I thought everyone's parents were the exact same way. Story 74. My dad considers his chainsaw a crucial piece of home improvement equipment, suitable for both exterior and interior jobs. My husband found this out when he and dear old dad were installing a new shower surround and the thing just wouldn't fit through the bathroom door. Story 75. I thought it was normal for married people to sleep in separate beds until their kids moved out. Found that was very not normal after my first sleepover at a friend's house. Story 76. My mom used to eat my butt When I was a toddler she would bite my butt cheeks because she thought they were cute. She told me about this when I was a teenager. Story 77. Now it's weird to call a remote the clicker. Since I was little that's what they called, so I did too. Have been made fun of for it, and I didn't know why until they told me. Story 78. My dad used to play the harmonica while driving to anything that was on the radio. We bought one of those neck holder things for his birthday once, but he never used it. Edit spelling. Story 79. Have a pot of Play-Doh on the stove. My mom would always have a pot of Play-Doh being made up for us to play with. It was weird going to friends' houses and not smelling awesome Play-Doh goodness when I walked in. Also a dress-up box and a box of arts and crafts. Everyone I know has dysfunctional families, and somehow I scored the best childhood ever. Story 80. My dad taught me that cardinals were called red jays. The joke is on my mom because once we realized that wasn't what they were called, and that my mom got mad any time we said it, we kept it up. It has become nearly a Pavlovian response. Look mom, a red jay, we shout. I could kill your father for teaching you that, she says and inevitably scowls. Story 81. I'm a skip so we have limited water resources. My mum would cover the backyard especially round the gutters with buckets and use the rainwater to flush the toilet, pouring the bucket in instead of using the flush. I wish I could say there wasn't multiple occasions where my ability to impress a lady wasn't ruined when found live bugs in our toilet. Story 82. A girl sitting next to me in class last month told me that something I was doing reminded her of her mom. I quickly said sorry and stopped. She was confused and had to say that it wasn't a bad thing. It turns out that not everyone is terrified of their mother. Story 83. Thought of one of my own. So my dad was in the service and eventually retired when I turned 16. When I was fairly young, 6 or 7, I thought all dads were bald. When I watched a movie and saw someone's dad who had a head of hair, it creeped me out. I can't remember if I started crying or not.